Hayward Podworks. 100 shows, one vision.
Our sources explain it all. For more information on upcoming shows or to suggest shows, email brianhayward2026@gmail.com. And now let's get into our show. Hayward Podworks is vision, deep dives into any topic.
I was immediately hooked by this anecdote in the source material about Rachel. She's this highly successful professional, crushing it at work, but she can suddenly spiral from just a minor inconvenience.
Right.
1 minute she's running a successful team, the next she finds a small bump on her throat and instantly catastrophizes it into, cancer and imminent death.
Yeah.
That intensity, that immediate jump to the worst possible conclusion, if that feels familiar, if your worry just consumes you, then this deep dive is for you.
That feeling of consumption, that's the key. I mean, those unpleasant, visceral feelings are a necessary part of life. They're supposed to signal that something is wrong.
They're a signal.
But when they stop being signals and start becoming the entire experience, when they genuinely hinder how you function, that's the moment action is critical. And that's what we're diving into, the source, the anti-anxiety formula. It's a focused roadmap for taking that action.
And what I love about this guide is that it's built on this dual approach.
Yeah.
It's deep introspection to understand why you're anxious, paired with practical, constructive tools to actually shift out of that draining cycle.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to synthesize that blueprint. We're going to cover, I think, 3 main areas.
Okay.
First, how to do that self-reflection to identify the unique dimensions of your own anxiety. Second, tackling the heavy mental stuff that keeps you stuck, like catastrophizing and distorted thinking.
The inner demons.
The inner demons, exactly. And finally, the actionable formulas you need to move past avoidance and sustain real positive change.
Okay, let's unpack this. We begin with a foundational concept the material calls the multifaceted you. The major takeaway here is that if you lined up 10 people who are all struggling with anxiety, none of them would present with the exact same set of symptoms.
Right. Your specific anxiety is, it's a unique cocktail. It's based on your physical sensations, your ingrained behaviors, your emotional triggers, and your cognitive patterns. If you try to treat just generic anxiety, you'll probably fail.
You're not treating the cause.
You have to map out your specific dimensions to work around them. And this is where that self-reflection is so essential, especially when you're identifying your stuck points.
What exactly are those stuck points?
They're the specific beliefs, and they're often deeply held, that are actively blocking your path forward. If you're prone to anxiety, the material points to some common patterns.
Like what?
Well, maybe you dislike change so intensely you'd rather stick with a familiar discomfort than what's the unknown. Or, perhaps you overprocess every single piece of information.
Analysis paralysis.
Totally. You just churn data until you're paralyzed. But the most common one, I think, is that voice in your head. Constantly dwelling on negative past experiences and, acting as your own harshest critic.
That sounds exhausting just to talk about. So how do you get past these beliefs if they're so ingrained?
This is where we bring in a really powerful clinical technique used in therapy known as imagery exposure.
Okay.
The goal here isn't to feel good immediately. It's to expose the trigger in a safe setting so your brain can build a new association.
Wait, if I'm already prone to intense worry or even panic, doesn't forcing myself to vividly recall some past embarrassment or future fear just make it worse? I mean, is this something you could safely do on your own?
That's a crucial question. It feels so counterintuitive because our default instinct is to avoid pain. But what makes the outcome different is the commitment to habituation.
Habituation.
You sit, you reflect, and you vividly recall the sights, sounds, physical feelings of your most worrisome situations. And the critical instruction is this. You live the experience thoroughly once, letting those uncomfortable thoughts stay until they leave at their will.
So you don't fight them.
You do not fight them or suppress them.
You let them burn themselves out.
Exactly. And when you repeat this daily, you are exposing the brain to the trigger without the negative consequence ever manifesting. You're teaching your neural pathways that this fear, this memory, this situation, it's just a thought.
It's not a physical threat.
Not a physical threat. That repetition strips away the power from the trigger and finally reveals the reasons behind those blocking beliefs.
That process of just sitting with the discomfort and letting it dissipate naturally, that feels like the real bridge. Because once you identify the source of the problem, the goal is to shift into problem-solving mode, right? Instead of just endlessly repeating the problem in your head.
And the material makes a crucial distinction here. Rumination is just replaying the problem and all its emotional fallout.
Right.
Problem-solving is about generating new, tangible solutions. For instance, if you're stuck ruminating because a team member isn't contributing, your mind is probably spinning all these scenarios about the project failing and you looking incompetent.
Which just increases that pit in your stomach.
Yeah, correct. So the conscious shift is, step 1, recognize you're in a loop. Step 2, force a question. Ask yourself, what is one thing I can change right now to address this?
Get proactive.
Instantly. Instead of spinning, you shift to constructive solutions. Schedule a meeting, delegate simpler tasks, propose a new structure. That conscious focus on generating action forces your energy from a negative space into a positive one.
That's a tangible mental tool right there. Okay, so moving from the architecture of our beliefs to the architecture of our imagination. Let's talk about catastrophizing.
This is where it gets really interesting because the core psychological principle is that your brain and your body, well, they can struggle to tell the difference between a real threat and a vividly imagined one. So if you are constantly jumping to the worst possible conclusions, imagining a catastrophe, you are literally flooding your system with the stress hormones designed to help you escape a bear.
You're living the negative event over and over, taxing your physical resources over something that only exists in your head.
Precisely. And we saw that powerful example in the material with Rachel. She's high functioning, but when anxiety kicks in, she loses all perspective.
Yeah.
We already mentioned the sore throat becoming cancer, but also in social scenarios. She walks into a room, sees people across the way giggling, and instead of thinking, oh, they're sharing a joke, she jumps straight to, they're laughing at me. Nobody likes me. I'm hopeless.
So her imagination is just manufacturing evidence to support the anxiety.
Yes, it's manufacturing evidence that confirms her deepest fear of inadequacy.
So the next critical step then is to identify and remove those distorted thought patterns. These are thoughts that are just fundamentally disconnected from reality, but they prevent you from moving on.
We should probably slow down and define a few of these. First, we have expanding and shrinking.
Which is when you exaggerate how awful a task is, making it seem gigantic, while at the same time you're shrinking your own ability to handle it. You tell yourself, this email is going to take all day and I'm way too tired to even start it.
And that leads directly to avoidance, which we'll get to in a moment. Next is filtering. This is a classic mental trap. You get 5 pieces of feedback, 3 good, 2 bad. And your filter actively ignores the good stuff. You focus entirely on how miserable those 2 poor scores make you feel.
It's like a mental rebellion we have to perform against that filter, right?
Yeah.
The key isn't to pretend the bad feedback doesn't exist. It's to force yourself to verbally acknowledge the positive stuff first, just to break the pattern.
Exactly. Then there's emotional reasoning. This is believing that because you feel a certain way, it must be true.
So if you feel intensely afraid of flying, then flying must be dangerous for you no matter what the safety data says.
Right. The emotion becomes the proof.
And the last one, which really fuels Rachel's catastrophizing, is unreliable forecasting. This is assuming a negative thought will automatically become real. You feel a fear about an accident, and suddenly you're convinced that just thinking about it means it will happen.
Yeah, you're basically punishing yourself before anything has even occurred. Recognizing those specific patterns is the first step to, rehabilitating your inner monologue.
Which brings us to the behavior that feeds this entire cycle. Avoidance.
We have to tackle what the material calls evading avoidance. Avoidance is so deeply rooted in our survival instincts, it gives us instant relief.
And that relief is addictive.
It is. It's an addictive, self-defeating reward. If you feel nervous about a crowded event and you bail, you get an immediate hit of calm. That short-term reward reinforces the idea that the threat was real and that avoiding it was the right solution.
And that just lowers your tolerance. If you avoid large crowds today, tomorrow your threshold is lower, and you might start feeling anxious just running into the grocery store. It can spiral really quickly.
To counter that learned behavior, the guide advocates for the step-up approach. It's a sequential, incremental process for tackling fear. And it's critical that you start by picking the least feared item associated with your goal.
So this isn't about giant leaps. It's about tiny nudges. We saw this with Jason, who had a fear of crowded malls. He wasn't told to go browse on Black Friday.
Oh, no, that would have been impossible. His path was incredibly gradual. It started with just an internal visualization.
Really?
Yeah, simply imagining waiting in line at the post office. Then physically going to the post office alone. Only much later did he try a movie theater during the quiet of a weekday afternoon. That built enough confidence that he could then visit the mall before it officially opened, just walking through the quiet corridors.
And then, only after all of that, did he finally progress to visiting the mall alone during a holiday, because he knew he had the mental tools to manage any rising panic.
It's all about tracking progress until the fear doesn't bother you anymore. You're proving to your brain, one step at a time, that the outcome is safe.
But even when we know the steps, the big roadblock we all face is that deep-seated resistance to change. I mean, why do we resist doing the thing that we know will ultimately make us happier?
Well, resistance often stems from the fear of the unknown. The devil you know feels safer than the change you don't. Or it comes from those blocking beliefs we talked about. I don't think anyone cares if I succeed, or even just, I'm too anxious to succeed, so why even try?
We see that so tragically played out in the anecdote about Steve.
Steve was the perfect example of comfortable stagnation. He spent 15 years in the same corporate position, not because he was bad at his job, but because he was actively unwilling to learn any new methods or technology. His anxiety manifested as this belief that his younger colleagues were mocking him and just waiting for him to fail, so he just hunkered down and refused to move.
He traded potential growth for guaranteed safety, but that safety was miserable.
It was, and his transformation was entirely dependent on him choosing to acknowledge his resistance and push past it. He started small, just like Jason, made plans, acted on them one minor change at a time, gathered social support to help hold him accountable, and over a couple of years he completely transformed his life, eventually going back to school, completing his master's.
So the material shows that your willingness to embrace the effort is really the only prerequisite.
That's it. It's the only thing you need to rewrite your life script.
Okay, that brings us to the segment everyone always asks for. The immediate tools. When acute stress hits, you need an instant lift, not a year of therapy.
Right. The anti-anxiety formulas provided are designed specifically for managing that peak stress response. The number one foundational tool is breathe.
Since anxiety triggers that quick, shallow, chest-level breathing, which fuels the fight-or-flight response, the counter is deep, controlled breathing from your diaphragm. You can place one hand on your chest, the other on your abdomen. Breathe in slowly, making sure that bottom hand moves out before the top hand does.
And then you exhale slowly, maybe telling yourself the word relax as the air leaves your body. You should repeat this for at least 10 conscious breaths, focusing only on the movement of your abdomen. This actively interrupts the physical part of anxiety and helps reset your nervous system.
Next up is exercise. We hear this all the time, but the material emphasizes why it works so quickly.
Yeah, it's not just about general wellness. Physical activity is a metabolic necessity because it helps burn off the surplus of stress hormones, cortisol, and adrenaline that your body produces when it gets alarmed.
So you're changing your chemistry.
You're changing your internal chemistry with action. A quick 15 to 20 minutes of running, jogging, even a brisk walk can chemically alleviate the physical symptoms of anxiety.
And finally, the quick soothing actions. Pets and music.
They offer a positive distraction from rumination. I mean, spending time with a pet, especially if you engage in rhythmic petting, promotes the release of oxytocin, which promotes bonding and beta moods. Similarly, listening to soothing, familiar music stimulates the mind positively, helping you transition out of that worry cycle.
But using these tools requires long-term commitment, and that brings us to the risk of burnout. The material warns strongly against perfectionism, and especially against what it calls borrowed expectations.
This is so subtle but so critical. Borrowed expectations are when you set goals based not on what you genuinely want, but on what you think others believe is right for you.
What your parents or your partner or your colleagues expect.
Exactly. You're chasing someone else's definition of success. And this, combined with perfectionism, is a major risk factor for chronic anxiety because it leaves absolutely no room for error or rest or faltering. If you do succeed, the success feels disconnected because it wasn't really yours. You have to define what success means for you.
And on that note, to sustain the effort, the guide stresses the need for constructive self-rewards. You have to give yourself an emotional payoff after tackling an avoided task.
And the reward has to align with the progress, not sabotage it.
Right.
If you spent 3 months on a weight loss journey, the reward shouldn't be destroying your progress with a supersized portion of fries. It should be buying that smaller size outfit you've had your eye on. It reinforces that positive momentum by linking effort, progress, and a tangible, constructive benefit.
So, to briefly reiterate the entire roadmap we've synthesized for you. You begin with that difficult introspection to understand the origins of your unique anxiety and its specific body and mood signals.
You actively work to remove those debilitating, distorted thoughts, the filtering, the emotional reasoning, the unreliable forecasting by catching them and challenging them.
Right.
You take small, measured, incremental action against avoidance. And finally, you use those quick tools like controlled breathing and focused exercise to manage acute stress.
And we just want to remind you that this is fundamentally your journey. It's okay to falter. It's okay to fail a step. The goal isn't immediate perfection. The goal is simply to be a little better than you were yesterday, every single day. Mm-hmm. The material leaves us with one final, simple tool for grounding. Stay in the present. So much of anxiety toggles constantly between the past, which you can't change, and the future, which you can't predict. Focus on your breath and just bring yourself back to the reality of now.
And we'll leave you with this final provocative thought that builds on the source material's idea of rigid persistence. Because anxiety often forces us into this loop of doing the same thing over and over, we have to learn to know when we've tried too long on a commitment or a task that isn't working for us anymore. It takes courage to stop.
Yeah.
So as you look forward, what is one commitment, one plan, or one idea that you are prepared to admit isn't currently serving you so you can stop, realign your efforts, and improvise a better path forward? That admission of futility is often the catalyst for the most powerful change.
Hayward Podworks. 100 shows, one vision.
All right, this is Hayward Podworks, and that's today's episode. If this helped you, do me a favor, hit follow, leave a quick rating, and share it with one person who'd get value. Want the extras, links, and new drops? Check the show notes. Until next time, stay sharp, stay consistent, and keep building. Hayward Podworks. We'll talk soon.